April 23rd, 1998.
When people saw this black and white video, they thought they knew what they had seen.
What you saw and what I saw on the TV video was revolting.
It looked like a training exercise as to how you should brutalize an African-American male.
What if the story wasn't black and white, but gray?
There is more to the story than simply the videotape. There are things that happened before the videotape, there are things that happened after the videotape.
The importance of the incident is almost symbolic now. It makes no difference whether it really happened that way.
We know that 81 seconds of videotape forever changed the life of Rodney King, but he wasn't the only one.
I've lost my innocence, that's for sure.
He's even a greater victim than anyone else could ever imagine, because he was doing what he thought he was trained to do.
Tonight, the Rodney King beating, the other story.
From ABC News, this is Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
We know what happened in the case of Rodney King because we saw it on videotape. We know what happened after the first trial of 4 Los Angeles policemen, when all of them were found not guilty and a mistrial was declared on one count against one of the officers. There were riots in South Central Los Angeles. More than 50 people were killed, some 2,000 others were injured, and there was untold property damage. We know that there was a second trial on federal civil rights charges, and that 2 of the officers were found guilty, while the other 2 were acquitted. We know that a civil trial eventually awarded $3.8 million to Rodney King for the injuries he sustained. But the story of what happened to Mr. King on that fateful night in March of 1991 was more complex than the piece of videotape we were shown again and again may have suggested. What was done to him was terribly wrong, but it wasn't as cut and dried as it seemed. And the fact that 2 of the police officers were ultimately found guilty and 2 others were not deserves a second look. The whole case deserves a second look, which is what Lou Cannon, a veteran correspondent for the Washington Post, gave it. His new book, Official Negligence: How Rodney King and the Riots Changed Los Angeles and the LAPD, served as the inspiration for this report by Judy Muller.
When this amateur videotape was first broadcast 7 years ago, the conventional wisdom was that it clearly depicted 4 white Los Angeles police officers viciously beating a black motorist named Rodney King with little or no provocation.
It's sickening. It's sickening. It's sickening every time I look at it.
Almost everyone agrees that it's sickening, but it may also be misleading.
It's a Rashomon in which most of the incident is never seen by the viewers of the movie, of the videotape. Most of the incident occurs before the videotape takes place.
In other words, your opinion about the incident depends on your vantage point. And for most people, the only vantage point was the tape.
It looked like a training exercise as to how you should brutalize an African-American male.
But there were other vantage points, and many of them conflict.
I was scared because this guy was on PCP and was probably twice as big as anybody out there. Already demonstrated his ability to use his body as a weapon and be pretty effective at it.
So I saw no fear in none of them's eyes. It was just to see how much pain I could go through.
Rodney King threw all 4 officers off of him, probably a total body weight of 600 pounds. He just picked them up and threw them off like rag dolls.
While King denies that happened, other witnesses say the officers did try to secure King by using the so-called swarm technique. But that occurred before the videotape rolled, as did the freeway chase King led police on at speeds up to 115 miles per hour before he finally pulled over and got out of his car. What's more, the first part of the tape, which shows King rising up and lunging toward Officer Larry Powell, was rarely shown on TV. That's because those few seconds were followed by this blurry section, and most TV news departments chose to edit out all of it.
So the videotape that we think we know and that I thought I knew, is a partial record of a partial record. And the record includes all these minutes of an incident that nobody ever videotaped.
Lou Cannon, who covered the King beating and subsequent trials for the Washington Post, argues in his new book, Official Negligence, that the press oversimplified the incident, which led the public to make sweeping generalizations. The prosecutor in the Simi Valley trial agrees.
No, the press never picked up on that in the first trial. It was always, the video speaks for itself, this is an easy case, and the people that were working on the case in the district attorney's office always knew it was not going to be an easy case.
We didn't prepare people for the possibility that this trial in Simi Valley, which was the most pro-police community in America probably, could result in acquittals.
We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty of the...
Those acquittals stunned Los Angeles and triggered the rioting that left the city in flames and more than 50 people dead. Would a better understanding of all the details have made a difference?
There still would have been an outbreak, but I think the police would have been more prepared, the city would have been more prepared, it would have been contained much more quickly and with much less loss of life.
Among those who had made their judgment based primarily on the videotape was President George Bush, who promptly ordered a federal investigation.
What you saw and what I saw on the TV video was revolting. I felt anger. I felt pain. And I thought, how can I explain this to my grandchildren?
I thought that was one of George Bush's shining moments. It seems to me that the President of the United States should use his position as the bully pulpit to defend and protect the civil rights of all Americans.
But what about the rights of the police officers? Did those damning remarks from the White House, coupled with the fear of another riot, put undue pressure on the jury in the federal trial? That jury found Sergeant Stacy Kuhn and Officer Larry Powell guilty of intentionally violating King's civil rights. Officers Ted Brasino and Tim Wind were once again acquitted. But, says Cannon, you'd never know it.
In the way that Wind and Brasino are treated by society, by police forces, they're pariahs. They might as well have been found guilty.
Tim is suffering enormously because people find out, no one wants to take a chance. So you apply for a job, you apply for school, you apply for an internship, and he's a decent guy. I mean, he did nothing wrong. And then all of a sudden finds out, he's one of the 4 white officers that beat up Rodney King.
He's the biggest victim of this whole thing.
For Tim Wind, who'd left a police job in a small Kansas town to fulfill a dream of working with the LAPD, those few minutes in 1991 changed everything.
I've lost my innocence, that's for sure.
He also lost his career, his income, and his health. Despite being cleared by a police review board, the LAPD refused to take him back. He blames stress for severe headaches and a ruptured bowel which required surgery. Many who have studied this case have expressed sympathy for Wind.
We always talk about giving people who have committed crimes a second chance. This man has been found innocent, and he's been given no chance.
I sympathize that he's not able to continue his life.
You do?
I do, but it's going to be difficult because everyone remembers that videotape, and he was a part of that videotape.
Death threats followed the trials, prompting Wind and his wife to take precautionary measures, like bulletproofing his child's room. He nailed Kevlar to the walls around his son's bed. The threats took a variety of forms, including this rap song by Ice Cube.
I got a Mac 10 for Officer Wind. Damn his devil butt need to be shipped back to Kansas in a casket. Crew cut faggot. Now we ain't nothing but food for the maggots.
Even now, Wind's guard is up when someone recognizes him.
And I've left stores, gone around blocks, left, went to my car, waited, went back, things like that.
Because you were uncomfortable with people
staring? Yeah, because I don't want the confrontation, so I avoid it like the plague.
Wind has had trouble finding a job. He used to make around $30,000 as a police officer. Now he makes about $10 an hour working for the Culver City Police Department, processing paperwork and running errands, which included at one time washing the chief's car. Even that job prompted an angry protest at the municipal building. Wind recently applied for an internship at a county agency. He says the woman who interviewed him called him later to explain why her supervisor had rejected his application.
He had said definitely he didn't want me there because I would affect the morale of the black employees and I would undermine the effectiveness of the office. I applaud her for telling me that, but in the same sense I'm very offended by that. He's never met me. The guy has no idea who I am other than this blip of time in history.
Wynn's wife, Lorna, has also encountered people who don't want to be around her, mostly out of fear for their own safety.
I've not been able to get some jobs because of who I am. I've had people working for me that have asked for transfers or have quit because of who I am.
It's changed us, and it's, you know, it's changed her, it's changed me. It's hard to, you can't be the same again. And
they've considered returning to Kansas.
I went back home to see if I could get my old jobs back, and I can't do that.
Why not? Same thing? They don't want you there?
Yeah, stigmatizing events being stigmatizing events.
You can't go back to Kansas?
Anymore, Dorothy, yeah.
A closer look at Tim Wynn's role in the beating of Rodney King when we come back.
To understand Tim Wynn outside the context of the King beating, it's important to look inside that context. Just what was his role in that incident? First, he was a rookie officer who did not really know any of the others. His training officer for the evening, Larry Powell, had failed a qualifying test for baton use earlier that day.
Larry Powell didn't have the technique, the strength, or the training to successfully deal with that situation.
The result? Powell swings wildly, catching King in the face and chest. The LAPD was forced to turn to the baton more frequently after the controversial chokehold was eliminated. It's a brutal weapon, even when it's used correctly.
When you use a baton, you're going to break bones, you're going to cause injuries, and it looks ugly and brutal and violent.
As for Wynd, 2 criminal juries and 1 civil jury, not to mention an LAPD review board, found that his use of the baton that night was within policy, even though he lacked experience.
It was the first time in my entire police career I ever used my baton on anyone.
If you watch in the tape, he evaluates, he stops his baton swings when there's no threat. When there is a threat, he uses this baton.
Wynd says he became frustrated with King's resilience, and he looked over to Sergeant Stacy Kuhn for some direction.
Can I pause going, you know, like, what the hell do I do now? This isn't working, what do we do? And I looked up at him and he went, hit him.
He did?
Yeah, you can see it in the tape. He goes, hit him, hit him.
Meanwhile, Sergeant Kuhn had twice used a taser stun gun on King, which can send out 50,000 volts per hit. But King got up after each jolt. Most of the officers concluded that could only mean one thing.
Every officer there, including the CHP, the Highway Patrol, believed that Rodney King was possibly under the influence of PCP.
They really believed that?
They really did.
King says he was not on PCP, just drunk. So why did he continue to move after being shocked? He says,
the officers kept beating me and running the electricity through me, so I could not stay still with all the voltage going through my body like that.
Finally, he did stop moving and put his hands behind his back to be cuffed.
I think most people could have understood if they had hit Rodney King a few times, 3 or 4 times until they had him subdued, had him down on the ground, his arms, handcuffed, then it's all over.
But it was not all over, and what happened next is the most controversial part of the arrest. First, Ted Brasino delivers a stomp to King's neck. Tim Wynn says he never saw that stomp. All he knew, he says, was...
Started to get back up, and I couldn't let him do that. It was almost over. I was like, oh no,
He's getting up again.
Yeah. I wish you could read minds through that tape, because you would see what I was thinking, and that's I could either mace him or kick him back over onto his stomach in the prone position where he'd been a little earlier.
And so while Powell continued to flail away with the baton, Wynn used kicks.
It didn't work, and I guess just looked too bad.
And those kicks still look bad to a lot of people, including the prosecutors.
Although I don't want to retry Mr. Wynn now, I still think that they're very troubling, and I think I'll always think that they were very troubling. He was kicking a man who was on the ground.
I do think that it was proper to charge him, and I do think the evidence was there to convict him. But I don't think that he is as blameworthy as the other defendants.
Kleiner agrees, saying Wynn was, quote, in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Because based on the evidence we had, there was no indication that Wynn had ever been involved in any other conduct like this, and there was no indication that Wynn held any racist attitudes.
In fact, neither prosecutor made race an issue in court, but that doesn't change the public perception of the incident based primarily on the videotape.
It really, really symbolize the cancer. I mean, just how rotten and how sick the institutional culture of that department was.
The importance of the incident is almost symbolic now. It makes no difference whether it really happened that way. So we all make up our mind, and the people that suffer, of course, are the officers that are involved, and Rodney King.
So what's happened to the other officers who participated in the beating that March night in 1991? And what about Rodney King? What's happened to him? Some surprises in a moment.
Where are they now, the players in that historically pivotal moment? Larry Powell has kept a low profile since he was released from prison and is reportedly pursuing a new career in computer technology. Stacy Kuhn used his prison time to study to become a Roman Catholic lay minister. A defense fund raised a couple of $1 million for his legal bills and his family's living expenses. Ted Brasino, who had a prior suspension on his record for hitting a handcuffed suspect with a baton, was acquitted in the King incident. But his testimony against the other officers in the first trial made him a pariah with police. He now works for a private security firm. The officers are not the only ones whose lives changed that night. Rodney King became an instant symbol of racial injustice, and during the riots, a symbol of anguish.
People, I just want to say, you know, can we all get along? Can we get along?
Yeah, can we all just get along? I live by that and I'll die by that. And I really meant that.
King admits he was afraid of going back to prison for violating his parole the night he fled from police.
I admit I was wrong, for speeding and not stopping the car sooner. But once I stopped the car, I did nothing to provoke the officers into being almost killed that night.
And he admits he's had some run-ins with the law since then.
Oh, yeah.
How many times? 11 times? Or
oh, way more than that.
These run-ins included a charge of spousal abuse for trying to push his wife out of the car. But King sees them all as a continuing pattern of harassment.
From the start, it's for the police to justify what they did to me. It's like...
oh, so you think they're out to get you?
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
But while he still has a rap sheet, he also has a rap label. The first CD produced by his company will be released on April 29th, the anniversary of the riots.
It was hell on earth, flames burning to the sky, and I can't believe the media was asking why. No justice, no peace.
King received almost $4 million in damages from the city, but says he didn't really get that much after lawyers took their cut.
The city of Los Angeles, they threw the bone, which was a check, out of the window, and basically told me to go chase it with your attorneys and all.
And he still suffers from headaches, backaches, and memory loss.
I'll forget, and leave something on the stove, and I come back to it, and the whole kitchen's burning up.
Like Wind, he also lost his privacy and received threats. Even so, he's able to joke about the unexpected silver lining.
If it didn't happen, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't have this rap label that I have.
Tim Wind has also found a silver lining of sorts. He's going to college in the evenings to get his degree and has discovered he loves research. He's now working up a study for a sociology class on why criminal suspects flee from police. Wind concedes it's an ironic topic for someone whose life was altered by just such an event in which the truth remains elusive and opinions are ironclad.
They still talk whenever they refer to this as the Rodney King beating. This wasn't the Rodney King beating. This was a situation where officers attempted to take somebody into custody that wouldn't allow themselves to be taken into custody.
That's where I have a serious disagreement. The incident was an incident of brutality. Yes, it was an incident of racism.
I could never prove that it was racial. And since I couldn't prove that, we didn't pursue that.
There is more to the story than simply the videotape. There are things that happened before the videotape. There are things that happened after the videotape. There are things that happened during the videotape that the videotape doesn't capture that's necessary for an informed view of the entire incident.
It was a well-intentioned but bungled and incompetent arrest in which everything that could have gone wrong went wrong.
There's only one truth. And, I told the truth that night. I told the truth about it all, and everybody else, they have their opinion.
It is an endless debate, and for Tim Wind, an endless nightmare. Your life changed in just a few minutes on a single night. How do you feel about that?
I haven't figured that out yet. I have no idea. I was just doing my job.
I'm Judy Muller for Nightline in Los Angeles.